hit you with the first one. Are you ready?
Okay.
You look so ready. So what does it mean to be a man?
Marcus.
Oh, sheesh. So this is one thing that's actually big now that we're talking about it. I think in my head, and this is something that I learned, this is super random, but I'm like very mindful of when I'm walking around with women and like kids that they're gonna be okay when I'm on the street, or like if there's a weirdo around, or like I guess in the back of my head, like that kind of stuff goes on. And I think that's part of being a man, but
kind of protector.
Yeah.
Here's my follow-up to that, but to come back to this very not male characteristic, to be vulnerable and say I don't know. It's hard to say I don't know, I need help as a guy. How do you guys overcome that? Like what are some things that maybe personal experience that you've had, maybe a story? How do you build that trust with somebody? How do you build that trust with God to be able to say, hey, maybe I don't have all what it takes, right? And I need some help here. How do you ask for help as a guy?
I think it goes along with like asking for directions as well, right? I think we never really like to do that, but
don't get lost, right?
In fact, that actually is kind of the cap over the well with that sort of thing, because it's a typical example, because I think guys want to portray like they've got it all together, that everything's under control, and I know exactly what I'm doing, I know exactly where I'm going, and a lot of the time we don't. A lot of the time we're probably really scared inside, thinking, oh my goodness, I wish someone could just come along and say, hey, let me just, take that off your shoulders, or let me help you with that, But I think asking and admitting, I think, are two very difficult things, I think, typically for guys.
I think the easiest time to ask for help or to be vulnerable with somebody is when you're in like community with them, in like not just like we talk whatever. It's like you talk deep. So like I remember being in college and living with guys in the dorms, and I had a roommate and all of that, and that's probably like I think the most vulnerable times I've had, because I lived with these people, I did life with them, and so it was a space where we sleep our beds are right there, we're eating food together, all this stuff, and it allowed for me to feel comfortable enough to talk about what I'm going through more often than waiting till later on. I think that's true in churches too, like when guys have like an ongoing, group or something like that, like people are not going to be pouring their heart out on the first one, but like by the fifth or sixth one, people start, as consistent as it is, people start opening up a lot more. They're like, oh wow, we're doing this often, I can trust this space, like I'll talk more freely. But it's hard to be like, I don't hang out with you at all, and then I'm just going to tell you, and be vulnerable with you. Like that's a lot. That's kind of extreme.
I'm gonna address this question to Steve, and the rest of you guys can kind of jump off and try to answer this as well. Steve, I know you've grown up in the church. Your dad was a pastor, so you've had plenty of church experience. I guess a question related to safety is, does church feel safe for guys? Church is great for ladies, but for a dude, is it safe? You know what I mean? How would you kind of unpack that?
It's easier to hide in a bigger group. So I think it is safe for guys to come to church, but it's another reason why it's hard to get guys into small groups, hard to get guys into triads, because you have to be vulnerable. You have to, well, you don't have to be, but you have the opportunity to be vulnerable, to be real, to deal with it. And to tell somebody else, hey, I can't do this is hard, because I can do everything, but I can't do everything. It's to tell people, hey, I need help, makes you feel weak, and I'm not weak. So it's like, that's what I guess as a guy you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to handle everything, even though you can't. So
that's a good point.
That's my answer, I guess.
How does your relationship with God impact your identity as a man?
There have been times where, if I was to try and answer your question, how has he shaped my role in being a man? It hasn't been in the area of being strong and tough and upright and pioneering. It's been more sensitive and understanding and listening and caring and responding in love. And sometimes, many times, in fact, I don't. But in the odd occasion, you know, I felt something very, very specific that God has said, no, respond this way, or I felt it, you know.
Because my dad wasn't always there, like I've had to lean into God to like father me. And even like as far as how I'm supposed to be a man, like when I was probably like 13, I felt like God called me to be a father to the fatherless. And so that's like become a real strong part of my identity. It impacts how I am and how, especially like how I minister and how like I communicate.
It kind of reformed it, because I mean, even growing up in the church, when I was 18, I did what I wanted. I feel like when I gave my life to Christ, it kind of like God needed to reshape what I would think, how I would be, my identity. He's still doing that, so it's a work in progress. But I don't get my cues from society, you know. I work around a lot of guys that none of them are believers, and they question why I do certain things, and they don't understand, you know, and they don't need to understand, and I'm okay being on my own in that. I guess my identity just comes from Christ, or just my decisions, you know, what I make are based on what God showed me to be the correct way.
Mm.